Vietnamese-American author, playwright, and performer Susan Lieu is the creator of her theatrical solo show, 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother, which received critical acclaim from LA Times, NPR, and American theater. Her debut memoir, The Manicurist Daughter, is an Apple Book Pick of the Month and Must Listen of the Month, and has received accolades from the New York Times, NPR Books, Elle Magazine, and the Washington Post. The co-founder of Sokola Chocolatier, she is a proud alumni of Harvard, Yale, and Hedgebrook. Hi guys, it's Saya. I am on location today at Greenhouse Nail Salon in Greenwood. It was actually really funny because I will be interviewing Susan Lieu, the author of The Manicurist Daughter, and her life story and her memoir take place around a nail salon. And so we thought it would be so full circle to do this interview inside of a nail salon. And so I reached out to Kelly Huynh, who has so graciously and generously allowed us to film here. I really, really hope that you enjoy this episode, as we'll be in this beautiful space and reminiscing on Susan's childhood, her journey of self-discovery, and everything in between. Hello, Susan.
Greetings.
It's such an honor to be with you today and to meet you in person, because seeing your life and your journey through your book and the darkest moments and also the brightest moments was so beautiful to see. And so it's awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to you and to Kelly and the rest of the team for having us here. I gotta say, out of all the podcasts I've ever recorded, this is very unique for me. The first time I've ever been at a nail salon to talk about my journey. So thank you for being so thoughtful about this.
Of course. I would love to just get right into it and have you set the stage for us. What was your childhood growing up like? And just, set the scene, the stage, and give us a visual.
Yeah, well, this is totally apropos since we are recording this podcast in a very beautiful, amazing nail salon in Greenwood, this is the first time I've ever recorded a podcast like this. Very, very nice touch. My childhood is what most kids think of their childhood, which this is normal. And my normal was after school going into our nail salon, which was named Susan's Nails after me. I was the first one and only one born in America. And I would just do whatever my mom wanted me to do. So take off the nail polish, get the tea and the coffee, instant Folgers, fill the money for the parking lot for the different customers, take their bags to the dryer, entertain customers so that they don't leave, confirm appointments for the next day. Like, this is all, the earliest recollection I have of this is since I was 6 years old. And I remember that moment when my mom was like, okay, you're ready. You're ready to start confirming appointments. And I was like so scared. I was so afraid that the customer would actually pick up the phone. Because I got really good at leaving the answering, the messages on the answering machine. But it was like the family was an army and everyone had a role to play. And mine felt very small because nothing I did actually generated money. But the things that my sister and I would do would make everything hum, right? Because there was always something to be done. And so for me, it's funny because I never grew up with after school programming or summer camp. Life was just the nail salon. And so for me, whenever I smell Mama instant noodles, like that was the thing we would microwave in the back when we had a moment for lunchtime. Whenever I see Orange Julius, I think about the times when we had a break and my mom would give me and my sister $5 each. We'd run across the street to the mall and then we'd get to have a kid's meal. So it was kind of like childhood was not just the space of the nail salon, but it was everything around it too that became our world. And across the street at that mall was also C's Candies. So every time we would park at the mall parking lot, we would all walk in with all our nail salon supplies and we would pass C's Candy and my sister and I would each have a sample of all these different sweets. And eventually that was the inspiration for creating our chocolate company called Sokola Chocolatier together. So it's kind of funny now when I look back on it, I go, this was a normal childhood. And yet it is not a normal childhood for most of America. But for a lot of Vietnamese Americans, this was also their childhood. So it's kind of this interesting journey as I was writing the book and doing all the plays to start finding people like me where this was normal, where it's not, like now I have a kid and I'm always like, oh, well, if you just put on your clothes really quickly, then I'll give you this cardboard coin and then you have done a chore and then you can watch 15 minutes of TV. Like it's so funny now that as a mother, I'm trying to design this life to be efficient for me when really it's like work and grit and being a part of the family. Like it was never rewarded. It was just our norm.
Can you, I kind of read about it in your book, but could you tell us about the day that your mom had her procedure and then how that impacted the rest of your self-discovery from that day on?
Yeah. So I was 11 years old. We lived in Santa Rosa, California, Northern California. And that morning was a very unusual morning because I woke up early to go to volleyball practice so I could go to volleyball tryouts. So I was going to do this thing and maybe make the team and I would, be popular. And my mom had already told me no several times, like, you cannot try out for the volleyball team. We don't have money to pay for the uniforms. So I'm like in the kitchen. It's like 6:30 a.m. and she's there too, which is unusual because she usually goes to work later. And we're both surprised to see each other. Unbeknownst to me, she's about to drive to San Francisco with my father to get plastic surgery, a tummy tuck, the narrowing of her nostrils, and a chin implant. And we clash heads, and she's just like, I told you you can't go. You need to focus on your schoolwork. And I was like, but I get straight A's, Ma. And she was like, it doesn't matter. And I get so mad because she is not a part of my life, and I want her to be so much, but it's always about the nail salon. It's always about taking care of the family, that we don't actually have a close relationship. And in that moment of fury, I say I hate her. I tell her I hate her. I slam the garage door. Their car pulls out of the garage. I stomp off to school. I'm going to show her. I'm going to do it anyways. And when I come home from school, I find out that my mom is in a coma. And my brother has come back from college and he's going to drive me and my sister an hour to San Francisco, and we're just going to wait. And up until then, the only thing I knew about comas is the soap operas that we watch in the nail salon. Like, I'm like, oh, well, they always wake up. Like, it's a low probability. A miracle is always going to happen. So that's what I thought was going to happen. After 5 days in a coma, she passed away. We bury her. My dad says I don't have to go to school. So I read books at the library. I go back to school. And Jessica, the school bully, goes, what's wrong with you? Your mom died or something? And all of a sudden I go, oh my God, everybody knows. And for the next 25 years, my family has never spoken of my mother, of her death, ever again to this day. I just came back from a family vacation with my siblings, and I was trying to just be like, guys, just give me a few stories, or how did you grieve or not grieve? And I was shut down so fast. And so even 28 years later, even us now having our own children, even us talking about intergenerational trauma and healing, my siblings have come to my events of my plays and my books. They can talk about it publicly, but not privately. And so every time I've asked growing up, like, are you guys okay? Like, tell me stories of mom. I would get shut down. They'd be like, Ma, why? Why you need to let that go? Why are you living the past? Why are you so emotional? And from 11 years old, I have blamed myself that I am creating problems in my family. What is wrong with me? And so it's been a very lonely journey. Because I thought they were right. But I think a daughter should know her mother. I think we should talk about hard things. And I think, in Vietnamese, we have a phrase, chia buồn, like to share that sadness so it's less crippling. But we never shared it. It's unresolved grief. And then what? What happens to that trauma? It gets lodged in our bodies. It gets passed on. It comes out in really toxic behaviors, through addictions, through negative relationships. And then what? So I grew up in Northern California, and so I did really hippie shit. I've done personal growth workshops. If you read the book and the chapter, The Cult, when I went to Harvard, I joined a cult. Gone to Burning Man. Done a lot of meditation retreats. Because for so long, I was like, I need to fill this void in my heart because I know something is wrong. But the very people who are close to me are denying it, are saying I'm crazy. So what do I do with that? So I kept reaching externally. I was like, oh, I guess I should just be on some spiritual quest, right? What, shouldn't I be happy? I was born in America. Wasn't that enough? Wasn't going to Harvard enough? I shouldn't complain about anything because my life wasn't that hard. And yet I have this sinking feeling that something is wrong. So I've done all the self-growth stuff, personal growth stuff. And it eventually led me to becoming a storyteller on intergenerational healing, going into theater and writing a book, even though I have no training in either of those things.
It must have been so hard in the beginning, especially when you were in that dark place. Do you feel more surrounded now and less alone? Do you think that people are starting to open up at all? Or how are you navigating that now?
I think mental health is such a weird thing. Like I can feel really great one day and then really just like a 30-pound blanket on my body, where I'm just feeling like everything is so hard. I'm a mom of a 4-year-old, and that creates like its own layer of hardness, like taking care of a kid that doesn't have like a fully developed brain, like it's hard. It's hard. And like trying to live a life where I feel like I have integrity.
I have 2 questions that were kind of clashing at each other, so I'll ask one at a time. But how do you kind of regulate your moods kind of day to day versus, I know over time it's been so much, but how do you hold this? How do you survive this experience?
I work out 3 times a week. Like seriously, like I'm really serious about that. I think for a long time I was working out, so one day I hope I become thin and then my family doesn't like make fun of me and body shame me anymore, and that was the motivator. And now the motivator for working out is I just need to stabilize my nervous system. And for me, I'm really into group class. Like everyone, I think for figuring out like what type of working out works for you, like I can't do it by myself. I am such an extrovert, so I do group workout class. I also use the Waking Up app to meditate 15 minutes a day. That's like the most realistic amount I can really get for myself. So that's baseline. I need to do that. I'm just trying to be mindful of like how much I drink. Like I think drinking like alcohol is a depressant, but it's like so steeped in our culture of like you're having fun or you're living a luxurious life if you're drinking, and it actually takes a big toll on my mental health. So I try to regulate that. So those are baseline things. I think for me, it's, I try to surround myself with people who like amplify my shine, right? Who give me life instead of take away life. And I think that's been its own journey of trying to figure out who those people are.
How do you know?
I think it's just like how much drama am I feeling when if someone calls or texts me, what do I feel in my nervous system? Like, am I just like, oh, here we go, or is it like, yay? And I think it's okay to have more yay in your life. You know, like it's okay to have people that are just fun. And I think over time, I've had to understand what is my currency in life. What do I truly value? And for me, I do value vulnerability. It's interesting to me because when I'm like, how are you doing? I actually really want to know how you are doing. If you say, okay, I'm good, that's actually not a lot of information to me. And my husband's always like, Susan, you don't always need why does everyone need to cry around you? And I was like, wait, people don't cry around you? You know, we recently got couples massage. And then I was like, oh my God, I was crying with my therapist, my massage therapist, and she was crying. She was telling me about a miscarriage she had. And he was like, what? I was like, wait, that didn't happen to you? He's like, no. So for me, over time, I'm like, you know what? That is me. Like, I do want to have deep connection with others. I value that. And some people don't value that. And it's hard because for me, it's like, I want everyone to be my friend. Everyone to be my friend. My gym instructor, I want her to be my friend. And my husband's like, Susan, you need to separate things. Family doesn't have to be friends. Your gym instructor does not have to be your friend. And I was like, but why not? Like, wouldn't that be a better world, right? So I think for me, as I've quote unquote growing up, I'm 39 and becoming an adult, it's trying to really discern does this person give me life or take away life? Does this job give me life or take away life? Everything is an energy exchange. And so if I'm feeling deflated afterwards or feeling really stressed out, it's like, girl, we got one life to live. You know what I mean? We don't know we are not immortal, even though we live that way. And so can I get to a place where I'm surrounding myself with good things to nourish me, right? If I just have junk food friends, I'm going to feel not very good. So how do I keep intentionally creating a life for me that is going to nourish me, and be intentional, because it's so easy to doom scroll. It's so easy to find the next dopamine hit. But am I actually coming from this place of honesty of actually, when I do that with that person, I don't feel good. Maybe I should do an inventory of friends. I actually don't have to be friends with them, even though I want to. Even though the question is it giving me life or is it taking away life?
That's a really beautiful way to look at it, and it's so simple. I kind of want to take us back to your relationship with your mom, and because I feel like throughout the book, you're dancing and weaving through your relationship with your mom, and then afterwards, your relationship with yourself, and then now you being a mother. So what was that relationship like growing up, and then how did it change you?
Yeah. It's interesting to have a mother who's a mythical figure, because she passed when I was 11. But even then, my mother, I didn't have that many moments where it was just one-on-one. The only time it was one-on-one, or felt like it, was when there was no customers and maybe I got to sit in her chair and be next to her before she told me what to do next. We didn't have mommy and me dates. We didn't have all these things that I saw all the American kids have, oh, we're going to have a sleepover and my mom's going to make popcorn and it's going to be so fun. Do you want to come over? She didn't have time for that, because we were 13 people in a 4-bedroom house, because she was responsible for remittances back to Vietnam for her 12 other siblings. She didn't have the bandwidth or capacity. And so the only one-on-one moments I got to have with her, I wrote about them in the book, and most of them were pretty sad. She was always trying to regulate everyone. Let's do exactly what she says, because this is going to be the most efficient thing and the best thing for the family. This is what's going to save us money. This is what's going to make us money. Why did you make such a bad decision at the buffet? You should only eat the high value proteins. Don't eat dumb mac and cheese, right? It's cheap. And so it's I see parts of her and me today, and I think that's the nature also of being a child of refugees. She was stern. She, like most Vietnamese women, are the generals of their house. They're running that house. Yes. And so it was never a tender relationship. I do see photos where she's holding me and I'm like 6 years old and I'm like, or 7 and I'm like really big and she's still holding me. And it's nice to see that. But I don't remember that feeling. So she was strong and we had to obey. And I was terrified of her. And I wish she was here. And she always knew what to do until the day she wasn't. And so it's so ironic that the most powerful woman in my life lost all control and couldn't solve the problem when she had a botched tummy tuck. How can the most smart, beautiful woman not solve her way out of this problem? So for a long time, I remember when we were at the hospital, I didn't believe she was going to die. I was like, oh, she's just going to come back. And then in an instant, it's all gone. I remember I talk about the day I got my period and she had just come home from the nail salon and I was like so nervous. These cramps hurt so much. I was so terrified and she just threw a pad at me and walked away. And she was more concerned about the white chairs, those dining room chairs getting dirty from me than taking care of my feelings. So that's what she was like in my life. And I think like just Vietnamese elders in general are so critical. And so her voice continues to echo in my brain around my body and what my body looks like. And, but she also like pushes me, you know? And I remember most recently I was in the Seattle Times and they were just doing a profile of paper boat booksellers in West Seattle. They talk about the whole bookstore. Then they're like, oh, we have local authors who come in. And there's a line about me that's like, and Susan came in of the Manicurist daughter before her publishing date just to make sure that there was enough copies in the bookstore. And they didn't really say anything else about me. Whereas the other author, they were like gushing about her book. And I was like, damn, I was like, wow, that makes me sound like kind of like a tryhard. And my girlfriend was like, oh no. It makes you sound like your mother's daughter. And I was like, yeah, she was a hustler and so am I, you know? And I just thought the way they wrote it was, I was like, oh, this is kind of funny and awkward. But also at the same time, I was like, yeah, you know, I think her determination lives on in me. Her fierceness lives on in me. And I think like internally, I don't ever feel that way, but by the risk that I'm taking in my life to do the work that I am doing as a storyteller, I am her. And I got to really discover that as I was doing all these one-woman shows. And the 5th one turned into 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother. But like, I didn't know her. After the first show, someone was like, wow, like, who was your mom? Like, the only time we see her is when she's in a coma in the show. And I was like, yeah, I wish I knew too. And so I've gone on this huge arc just to know her. And the more I know her, the more I feel like I embody her.
And you also learned to love her. And in doing so, you learned how to love yourself in a way. Do you...
Do I love myself?
Well, like, do you feel that she continued to teach you how to love yourself by teaching you how to love her, even though it wasn't always perfect and it wasn't always easy? Because a lot of it sounds like it was really hard.
Yeah.
It was a tough love. So how did that shape your understanding of love and how you chose to love her even after she was no longer part of your life?
I think there's a deep desire to be perfect and to believe that if you're not perfect, you're a failure. And I think by doing all my shows and learning about her flaws, to really acknowledge, yeah, she died from vanity, man. She died from something preventable. And she also said we didn't have enough money for volleyball. sweatshirt, like uniform, like $20. And she spent $5,000 on plastic surgery. You know, I'm sitting there going like, wait, what? What? So it was interesting to go on this journey to find all this documentation about what happened around the things that people won't talk about. And then to go like, wow, she was a flawed person. And so that's it in the book is I'm like, no, my mom's an anti-hero, dude. Like, she's good and she's bad. And you know what? So am I. We are just all human. We all have flaws. All of us. All of us. But the thing is can we accept that actually how we're showing up right now is our best? That's what our best is going to look like. And sometimes our best is our worst. And that's okay. Wow. That's okay too. It's okay to have flaws. And can I get to this place where perfection or imperfection is perfection, right? Because if nothing is perfect and all is imperfect, that means all is perfect. Can I get there today?
I love that part of the book where you stand up to your auntie at the end.
Squeeze back chapter. Yeah.
Yes. Can you just for the fun of it? Can we hear it from you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So all my life I've been the fat one. There's been just so much like fear built into my psyche that if I am fat, no one will ever love me. No one will marry me. And then I'll die a spinster, you know, and it's like, but please keep eating. Oh, you should keep eating. You know, and it's like so confusing. My relationship with food is so messed up. And I've ongoing as an adult have been trying to unpack that and unlearn that. So then after I had my kiddo, it was in the middle of COVID and vaccines came out. So then I was able to fly down from Seattle to San Francisco. I wanted everyone to dote on my son. I wanted my son to know that he is part of a bigger family than just our 3-person nuclear family. I'm at my sister's house. We're having a barbecue. Everyone's having, you know, as relatively a good time you can. My aunt, she says hi to me. She welcomes me. And she goes, huh? Have you gained 40 pounds? And I'm startled. I'm like, you know, I'm still new mom bod, you know, and I was like, yeah, is this like before I got pregnant or after I got pregnant? As if it matters. Like, it doesn't matter, but I'm just like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I know she doesn't mean to be negative. Like, she's not trying to make me feel bad. Like, it's just like it's a thing Vietnamese people do. They're so observational all the time. And yeah, it's like, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're never enough, right? That's just like normal. And she comes up to me and she just squeezes my fat. She just stands there and she's just squeezing me. And this is so uncomfortable because in general, we don't ever even hug. We don't even touch. And now she's just squeezing my fat. And I realize, Susan, I'm like narrating to myself in my brain. I'm like, Susan, this is a moment you're going to remember for the rest of your life. Your son is listening to you. Anything that is happening right now is normalizing everything for him and for yourself. And you're not little kid Susan anymore. You're a mom now. And this is your moment to redefine it. So what are you going to do right now? And so I'm like sitting there. It's like slow motion. And I'm like, and then finally I just like grab her fat right back. And like, right, I don't touch my elders, but I just grab her too. And finally I go on this like intense varsity blues monologue. And I was like, my mom died from a stomach surgery. Is that what you want from me? Is that what you want? You want me to die from that too? She says, no. And then my voice just starts rising and rising because I want everyone. I want all my relatives out in the backyard by the pool to also hear this too. And I said, well, guess what? Whether I'm skinny, whether I'm fat, I don't even care what my body looks like. Never again do I want you to ever talk about my body again. Because if you do, I don't want to talk to you. So please, you, all the other aunties, anybody else, never again. You know, in psychology with therapists, we talk about setting boundaries, using I feel statements. That works for like maybe white people. Or just like social, like mentally stable people, right? But it's like for people who don't deal with their trauma, like you can't say I feel. Like in Vietnamese language, we don't even truly have a pronoun for I unless you say thou when you're pissed, right? Like we don't have the individual, we always have the collective. So to be in a place where you say I feel statement, right? You don't say I feel hurt, you just say I feel that you're dumb. You know, like we don't have those tools. And so for me to finally stand up to my 4-foot-tall auntie and set a boundary was big for me. It's so big. And I that's what I really wanted folks to understand is like, oh, she just said, don't do that again. And it's like, no, you're not allowed to do that with elders. You're not allowed to have opinions, set boundaries, say what's okay or not okay. That's their job. That's their job. But finally, I did it because my son was listening. And then I finally had the courage to stand up for myself. Because one, I don't want him to be like, oh, mom gets punked around. But two, what's okay and not okay about our bodies? Who truly owns our bodies? And guess what? Our bodies are the only things we own on this planet. You're born with it and it goes away with you. And it is your vessel for allowing you the ability to live life. You own it. It is yours. And for other people to minimize you through your body is cruel. And so that ended in that moment.
And I know it took you many years to work up to that as well, because for me also, I completely relate to rank in the family, and as the youngest, you can't say anything.
Yeah, you got no power.
You really, no power.
But you're the baby, so you also have some other form of psychological power, right? But technically no power. Yes.
Exactly. I wanted to take you back to your early days, 20s, navigating who you were. And I know that you landed in a lot of dark places. And
just look at my resume.
Yeah. It was like, I felt like you had such a you describe your childhood with so much brightness, also darkness. But I felt like after your mom passed away, then it was just this period of darkness and trying to find the light. And so how did you rise from that? I know that you also searched for belonging. How did you finally accept yourself?
I don't think there's ever like, I'm 100% self-accepted. You know, like I still struggle.
Right.
I still struggle. And I want that to be clear. Like it's not a thing that's binary. I think self-acceptance is this like nebulous thing that's always like globby and morphing all the time. So I want to state that.
I guess like I was thinking of when you were at Harvard and you felt like you didn't belong, and then you were in the cult and trying to find self-acceptance and love, and it wasn't there either. And then you went to Vietnam to search for answers, and you were just met with silence. And I'm so curious how you made it out of that, because your whole life is questions that are unanswered. But somehow you managed to create something out of this nothing that people were giving you.
Yeah. I think it was just through a lot of experimentation. I think the reason why I stayed in the cult, it was about a 6-month period, was I was scared to trust myself. Like for so long, like in high school, your main goal is to get into college, right? And like you do everything to get into college, this big moment, and somehow your life is supposed to be done somehow. And when you get to college, you're like, oh my God, there's so many choices. Oh my God, what am I supposed to do? And for me, I was like, who am I supposed to listen to? I had a lot of competing voices. One was my dad. One was what my peers were doing. Everyone wanted to get into McKinsey or go into investment banking at Goldman Sachs, which is the equivalent of like working at Meta today, okay? But like, there was all these things of like what I should do. And it's easier to listen to everybody else. But the thing is even though I kept listening to my dad and he was like, become a lawyer. And I was like, okay, but the more I learned about what the day-to-day life of being a lawyer is, and also I'm really bad at standardized tests, I was like, that's not for me.
I have the same experience.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can get a legal degree and do it and use it for other
Yes.
ways, and that's cool too. But the day-to-day, I was like, that's not for me. And so I had gotten some advice from mentors, which was like, take risk, follow your curiosity, just experiment. You know, like, you don't have a mortgage and kids now. You have time. You don't have that much at stake. Just try it now. And over time, I was like, you know, I just, that advice is really resonating with me. And so I kept doing it. And one thing of doing it was being in the cult, because I felt this sense of belonging that I didn't have in my own family. And even though they were being manipulative, even though I knew it was kind of a cult, like, at least the rules were consistent. Because I think sometimes in a family, it's like so strange how things happen, because it's based on your positioning, right? And it's based on the behaviors that have been set in place over the decades that are so firmly stuck that you can't undo them. And at least with the cult, I knew the rules of how to be good, to have that approval. But over time, I was like, this is a cult, Susan, get out, get out, get out, get out. And then I was like, trying to develop the muscle. Yes, I want their approval, but can I trust myself? But wait, Susan, being in the cult is, because every time I would leave, I'd be like, well, the default world of what I do have in terms of the lack of the emotional connection with my family, or not really feeling like belonging, maybe it's just better to be in the cult. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I was actually conscious. I was like, this is not a good idea. And I was like, well, actually, isn't it better though than what you have? That's the sadness of that story, right? I intentionally, I remember my editor was like, I don't understand why you have this whole cult chapter. It was like 3 times longer than what it actually is in the book. She's like, I don't get it. And I was like, oh, geez. I was like, I don't get it either. And I had to like really make sense of myself, because it was a time like I try to forget, right? It's a very shameful time. But because we're all the anti-hero, I had to make sure that that chapter was in the book to say, I have flaws too. Right? Like, it wasn't this story of like, I'm a good person trying to find the truth and everyone's bad around me. It's like, no, everyone's doing their best and we're all just monsters, right? I wanted to do that. But to answer your original question, it's like, over time, I had to keep trusting myself. And my intuition said, go to Vietnam, Susan. You are scared to go to Vietnam after college. So go and do the thing that scares you, you know? Or like, I was like, oh, like, there's something, like, I went to business school and I was like, oh, I want to go in the nonprofit space, but everyone was like, go in the private sector so that you can like gain skills faster and you can translate that to the nonprofit sector later. And I was like, okay, you know, and I like tried the private sector for a little bit and it just kept spitting me out. So like, so much of me like wanted to stay. Like, finally I'm making more money than I've ever made. And finally I could give my dad money every month and be a good daughter. And finally I could be enough and I could have his approval. And it was like, my intuition was like, no. It was disgusted. It was like, I hated Sunday nights. It was like school all over again, because you have to, like, homework is due, right? Like, on Sunday nights, I knew I had to go back to work. And I knew I had to go to a place where I didn't feel valued. And so over time, it's just like, you know what? This makes no rational sense. I have an MBA. Why go into theater? Why become a writer? You know, why do all these things? Like, you're not trained in it. You're not trained in My dad, you know, with Uncle Number 9, the spirit channeler, he was like, she's not trained in this. I don't know why she's so dumb. Like, I don't know why she must be allergic to work. Like, that's the only sensible explanation, you know? And it's like, I was like, oh God, I hate that I'm such an intuitive person, that's how I make my decisions. It's irrational. It was irrational, the amount of debt that I had from business school. And yet I kept turning towards that. It was, and I never even fully made the leap to being an artist until I got fired. You know what I mean? Like, it was like corporate America's like, no, seriously, leave, you know? And I'm like, damn, like, I had never felt like such a failure until I moved to Seattle, where I had 3 jobs in 4 years. The first one I quit because I was like, oh, I'm not really into it. Second one I got fired, and the third one I got fired. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I'm such a like overachiever, try hard, but life's not working out. And it's like the universe was like, it's not working out because you're not actually pursuing what you're supposed to do. And I'm going to get you there, you know? And it's like, that's kind of like my Western hippie Susan talking, right? Like my dad's like, no, you're allergic to work. Okay. You lazy. Okay. You stupid. Why are you so stupid? Huh? You know, how come you không nghe lời? Why are you not listening? Huh? You know, and it was like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I do this just work, Susan? And it was like, but everything in me was like, no, you must go here. My husband thought it was irrational. Like he was just like, can't you just like, you like being busy, like have another hobby. And I was just like, I'm trying to be that person, but everything in my being is saying, do it this way. And so the moment of me really feeling like I'm having a more realized life, like where I'm self-actualized, where I feel more fulfilled, where I feel like more of a glimmer of happiness than I've ever felt before, was when I finally trusted myself, irrespective of my family tribe. I finally started talking about the very thing I was not allowed to talk about. When I didn't hinge all of my self-worth on their approval, and when I did the thing for me to finally dislodge the trauma, for me to finally process what the hell happened in the last 2 decades, that's when I started to feel alive. And that's when I started to feel like more of a fulfillment in my life. And then maybe that was the biggest surprise of all, because doing the play was really for me to finally heal the work around all the pain. And then in that process, I discovered a community of people that wanted the same thing.
I resonate so much with everything. And it's so courageous of you to have gone through, and instead of avoiding it or saying, you know what, I'm just going to give in and listen to what everyone says, you trusted yourself.
But see, it's courageous to you, but it's still a big risk internally in my family. You know what I mean? Like it
Right.
comes with its trade-off. Like it's not like, all you got to do is be courageous. Like it's also risking relationships, right?
Sacrifice.
Like it's really rocking the boat.
Right.
And really don't do it. But it's just like, if there's that quote where it's like, I had to bloom. I had to blossom because it was more painful to stay closed, you know? And so I think that was like the biggest risk, was like, am I willing to risk my relationships with my family? And I was just like, but my relationship with my family there's love in my family. There really is. And, you know, are they the person who's going to bail me out at 3 a.m. in prison? Totally. Totally. They're going to be like, Susan. And I'll be like, sorry, guys, you know, but, you know, yeah, they would do that. But do I sometimes feel small in my family and feel pretty confused about it? Yeah, I do. You know, and it's like, what do I need to do to take care of me? Very Western concept, right? But it's just like, also like, I remember I met this Rastafarian when I was in Zambia working in a refugee camp in college. And the Rastafarian was like, I was in love with this man who I think was actually like an asexual or gay man who was never going to love me, but I like loved him for like 2 years. And I was like, oh, I have this love in my heart. Why won't he love me? And I was like, what should I do? And the Rastafarian was like, Susan Lieu. He was like, oh, you must do the thing that you're going to feel right about, enough about, have integrity around, because only you go to bed at night and only you feel those feelings of what that inaction does to you. So what must you do so that you can feel worthy, so that you can feel complete, so that you don't feel small? Make that choice. Unfortunately, I was like still in love with the guy and I never went anywhere. But you know, like it was like, and I like confessed my love to him. But like, it's like that, which is, yes, family is very important. And yes, they are very high on my priority list. And yes, I must do things to honor them. But the quintessential question is, how do I love them while loving myself? What does that look like? Because oftentimes I do the things to just love them and I disregard myself.
Wow. Yeah, I really resonate with that too. Do you find it like emptiness in a way?
Let me just start a train of thought.
Okay.
You tell me. So I just got a message from this guy from high school. He was like, oh, I just finished reading your book. And it's like kind of crazy because like the Susan I knew in high school is like, I didn't know like all this stuff is going on for you. And I was like, yeah, you know, the external ego is much different than my own inner ego. Like, it's like I wake up kind of feeling alone a lot. Even though if you read my acknowledgments section, I remember I was recording the audiobook. They were like, well, you're going to have to definitely come back for a longer session because this is like a really long, this is like one of the longest acknowledgments we've ever seen. And I was like, yeah, you know, like I was raised by a community of surrogate mothers. And I want to honor that. You know, like default Susan waking up in this world is pretty alone and skeptical and afraid and insecure. I remember my therapist in college I was like, why am I like this? Like, I remember I saw a brochure. It was like, do you think you have depression? And it lists out all these like symptoms. I'm like, yeah, I do. Like, I didn't even know what it was. And I go in and I said, why am I like this? You know, like I'm really accomplished. Like I have friends, like overall everything feels right, but it doesn't. Like there's something strange. And she was like, oh, sweetheart, you lost your mom when you were 11. That's like Chicken Little. Like, it's like worried that the sky is falling. And actually your sky actually fell. And so you can't trust the sky to be there tomorrow. You know what I mean? You lost this like inherent trust with life. And so of course you feel that way. And that was the first person that ever connected the dots for me, right? Like this is like 7 years after my mom had died. And finally, someone validated my experience. Wow. So of course, life always felt kind of confusing. Of course, I'm pretty skeptical that things are always going to go wrong. Like, is that the burden of being a child of refugees? Or is that also like, no, I just had a very traumatic moment by losing my mother and never talking about her ever again. Right? So like for me, my default life inside my brain is quite insecure and anxious. But it's in stark contrast to how people perceive me, right? Like they're like, oh my God, like things are working out, or like you made it. You're famous now. You're a celebrity. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a D-list celebrity, guys. Like, let's not be so presumptuous here. But it's more like, how people perceive me is not how I feel inside, right? Like, I think I'm constantly battling this Chicken Little concept where I'm like, I can't trust anything, right? And so it's a very strange experience for me to live on this planet. Because I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to enjoy life. I'm trying to enjoy the ride while it happens, you know? And I was like, it's about the journey, not the destination. I'm like, no, it's not, we're late. You know, like I become so outcomes focused that it's really hard for me to be still and embrace the joy. And I think part of that is the fight or flightness of being a child of refugees. And also of just not trusting that things are going to work out because of all that trauma with my mom.
Right. Wow. Can I ask you kind of a more creative question on the side of your more creative side? How did you find your voice? Because like for me, for example, like doing these podcasts or creating a company or just figuring out like even how to just interact with life. How do you find your voice?
I will say, I feel like I'm always in a state of trying to find my voice. Like I have so many projects that I want to try on. I'm like, ooh, how do I do that? I don't know. So there's that Susan who exists. And then there's the other Susan that I needed a date and a time. It's very interesting that you chose this location because across the street, a few blocks away, is where I got my theater start. It was a place called Pocket Theater. And I had a date and a time. I had a show date and time, and it was my first 25-minute solo show. And I had told myself, once I do this, then I will have demonstrated that I am not a coward. And I will have accomplished my dream of proving that I am a performer, and I will do that. And then I will take out my IUD and become a mother. Like, it was just like such a linear, like, and then I will do this, you know? And because there was a date and a time, 2 shows of my 25-minute first ever solo show, Dr. X, How I Avenged My Mother's Death, terrible, unoriginal title. My procrastinator self showed up. She showed up with her big girl pants about 2 weeks before the show and was like, what are we doing? I thought we were just going to be doing some absurdist comedy stuff. Now you're going to actually talk about your mom for the first time. What are we doing? We need to write a script. We know what are lighting cues? Oh my God. You know, like my mind started spinning. I started freaking out. I didn't know what I was going to do. I asked friends for help. We started jotting down stuff. And then I just like wrote stuff because I invited some friends and I sold tickets. And eventually my later director was like, oh, Susan, no one pays to go see a rehearsal. Those words have been seared in my brain because it is then forcing me for excellence, forcing me to do my very best, forcing me to make it happen. This is when editing is happening, right? Because you're like, oh my God, people can't just show up and then I'm going to look dumb, you know, or like, it's kind of cute the first few times, like I'm trying this first, but eventually it's like people paid to see a show, so give them a show. And it was through that iteration. So yes, it's experimentation, but it's also the pressure of public facing, of money, like people paid money for this, and like, and some of it is pride, right? Of like, no, show up with your big girl pants, girl. It's time to go. It's time to go. It's time. Well, there's like, every day you wake up is one less day you have until the show, yes. Right? Like, because I think when I'm creating, like right now, I'm like, I've got a lot of concepts right now and I have no date and time. I'm just floating. I just don't know what I'm doing, you know? But like when I got a date and time, it's showtime, you know? and that is that propels me to experiment. Right. And push something out and be like, this is the best thing. Okay, look, react, you know, and then also I can look and react. I can see how that felt. I can know those words weren't working. I know, ooh, let's milk that a little bit more. Or, ooh, when I finally made the 5th iteration, 140 pounds, I took elements of different shows and I kind of started playing Play-Doh with it. I thought about all the things that I regretted about different shows. I was like, but I want to be funny. How do I make this funny? Let me learn how to make this funny, you know? And I found different experts and different designers to help me realize a dream. And that show, when we had the world premiere of 140 pounds, it was beyond expectation. Wow. It was more than I could have imagined. And so I'm glad that after that day at Pocket Theater, I didn't go like, okay, I'm taking out my IUD. Like it was when my friend Ben came up to me, he's like, but who's your mom? I want to know her. And I said, yeah, me too. Who knew that would be the beginning of so much more?
I'm curious what your relationship with your son is after having been a daughter and now being a mother, what that's like and how you show up in that role now.
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, I have more flexibility in my schedule. And so that's like hauntingly terrible for me and also really great. And I remember there was a moment at preschool where we had a total like miscommunication about like, I was like, I'm bringing you things for Lunar New Year, for Thut, for you to give, you know, when you're going to celebrate, here's more props or artifacts. And then they were like, oh, so you're going to come teach the class that day. And I was like, oh, I don't have time on that day, whatever. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to make time because my mother never attended a field trip. My mother never came to the classroom. My mother never did any of those things, right? She just didn't have the time. And as you read from the book, it's like, that's all I wanted from her was her time and attention. I just wanted to be near her. And so for me and my son, when I can do that, because he's like the only Asian kid, one of the few Asian kids in his class. Like, I want him to feel proud of being Vietnamese. I want him to feel seen by me. I don't want him to think that his only memories of me were scarring ones, right? Like, so there's that where it's like, I want to show up in his life more. There's also a lot of like hesitancy and anxiety around food, because sometimes he's like, I want more cereal. I'm like, okay. And then he'll like eat like one Cheerio. And then I'm like, he's like, I'm done. And then there's like so much in my being that's trying to stop from like choking him and be like, don't waste food, eat it. You asked for it, you should eat it. Like, it's like all of my elders like soundtrack. I'm just about to press play. And then I'm like, Susan, be rational. That's 13 cents worth of Cheerios from Costco. It's not that much. Just like, be chill, Susan, be chill. Right? Because like, I'm trying to not have him have messed up relationship to food and to trust his body and to listen to his body, because it's so much work for me to undo. So it's always like kind of like trying to stop myself mid-sentence. I'm like, Susan, that would be very traumatizing right now, but then it's like, sometimes I'm like, no, like, I'm like tired. I like said the same thing 9 times. I listen to his feelings. Like, come on, guys, we're getting out of that house, and like, I lose it as a mom, right? Like, those moments are still really real. But in terms of just being intentional around food, around not feeling shame around our bodies, like, I actively talk about body parts and we name them instead of having shame around them, right? Or we look at our bodies and we just don't hide behind our bodies, Like, I think there's so much shame around body in my family that I'm just trying to flip that script. And I'm also trying to really help him be like, so what are you feeling? I feel blank, right? Feeling word, not I feel like you're dumb. I feel what? I think the most important skill I can teach my son is for him to know what he feels, because sometimes it's very confusing. What is it that you feel? Can you verbalize what you feel? And can you ask for what you want? Maybe you need space in that moment. All right. Maybe you need a hug right now. Maybe you want to continue to be angry for a little bit. Okay, fine. Can we even do that as adults? I'm trying to teach him that, and I also am wanting him to follow his curiosity. I also encourage him to do stand-up jokes at the Children's Museum stage.
That's so cute.
Yeah, it's really cute. He's like really into it.
Wow. What's next for you?
I'm doing some public speaking now. I'm a speaker with Macmillan Speakers Bureau, and it's super exciting. I love being on stage still. It's very life-giving to me, and so please book me. I have about 6 creative projects that I'm thinking about right now, and I'm looking for collaborators. I'm just tinkering around. I'm trying to figure out, how do I exist on TikTok? So I'm open to tips. I'm trying to figure out, how do I still sit in the spirit of experimentation and finding my voice and landing on it? Because that's what 140 pounds was. It was eventually a proof of concept that I got to tour around the country. And that's how we convinced people to like become my literary agent and then eventually get a book deal. It was that show. And so for me, it's like, maybe how do I live in this place of nothing's ever done? Like, everything's a work in progress. I am not perfect, right? There is no done. We're always this like mess of Play-Doh, right? And so it's very funny that you interviewed me on this day, because I had just sent a little deck to some people, including my agent, and it says, decide Susan's creative fate. Because like, I don't even know, like, I have all these ideas, kids programming, dramedy shows, different things around motherhood. Like, it's almost like a curse to have so many ideas. And I just want to kind of sit with that and enjoy the fact that I have the privilege to think about what I want to do next and to try it out. And so I am looking for a little encouragement and courage. The word courage is an encouragement to try new things. I'm a multi-hyphenate storyteller which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because I'm like, going to theater, like Julie Pham, who had introduced us, like she introduced me to theater just a few years ago. I had never really gone to theater because I was like, I can't relate to the Nutcracker and Shakespeare. This is boring to me. And she introduced this world to me, and I stepped onto stage, which was kind of like this echo from stand-up comedy, right? And it was this beautiful place where I knew I wouldn't be heckled. And then eventually I went into the book space, and it's like, I don't have an MFA in creative writing. Like, if anything, my brother, when I was in 7th grade, was like, you suck at writing. And I was like, yeah, I do suck. It's, where next? I want to go into film and TV. I think Hollywood is a really scary, intimidating place. And so the question is, in the spirit of my mother, in the spirit of you only have one mind, one heart, two hands, do it yourself, figure it out, make it happen. In the spirit of immigrants and refugees, of always turning nothing into something, how do I move to my next medium? And I'm completely terrified. But also, I know that's what I'm supposed to do.
Wow. Thank you, Susan. You are incredible. And thank you for sharing your story and being here today and inspiring all of us.
Thank you so much for having me. It really fed me and gave me life to be here. Thank you.
This episode was filmed at Greenhouse Nail Spa. If you're ever looking for a breath of fresh air and some pedicures or manicures, come treat yourself. It's beautiful here.
It's super chic. And I have a tailbone injury, so this is like a very comfortable couch. Like, this is the most like baller high-end mani-pedi place that I would recommend in Seattle. So this is like next level stuff.